job is something that you do for like a big outfit, right? But now with like for the likes of Crestwist, I mean, I literally um, one of my most successful years on my own was 2019. And I ran most of 2019 just with Crestwista. I mean, I actually, pretty much did all the, negotiations and, brokering stuff on my own. And obviously, I was a bit more hands-on than I used to be in Stanchart in terms of doing a bit of my own models and presentation. But everything else, Crestwista did for me.
Hello, this is Abhilash Jayakumar, co-founder and managing director of Trustvista. On today's Trustvista talk, I have the pleasure of being accompanied by Arnab Chatterjee. Arnab wears many hats, including senior managing director of the Middle East and South Asia for RJ Fleming & Co. and managing director of Trident Consulting, a new venture formation market entry business development consulting firm for early stage companies. And he's a principal investor in many entities. Arnab, thank you so much for joining us today.
Abhilash, very nice to be on the call today.
Arnab, can you maybe take us back to start of your career and tell us where you started and how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, a relatively long story. I'll try to keep it short. And I think I've been a little bit non-stereotypical in the way I've progressed my career. So like most of us, starting up early in India, we were all trying to be engineers and doctors as per our parents' guidance, like most of us. So yeah, put in the early years of very hard work. I did well, managed to get into IIT. I had a good rank, got into computer science, and I think I put a bit of brakes on it, like many of us do. You kind of peak at one level. So I think I peaked when I was in my year 12. When you're like studying like crazy at that time. And college was fun. I mean, it was the good thing with the IITs is it's entirely up to you on how much stress you want to take and how much you want to deliver. So we all, I think, drew our own lines in terms of how much we wanted to work hard and how much we wanted to achieve. It was a great place, more so for many more things beyond studies. So many of us picked up various passions. Social, cultural, music, sports. We saw people like pick up things which they had never done. We had people picking up guitar who never played a guitar. People becoming big sportsmen. So it was in that sense an amazing place. Obviously, a great growing ground for all wonderful people. From your Sundar Pichai, who was like 3 years my senior from IIT Kharagpur. So you've had like a very wide spectrum of people in every walk of life coming out from there. So my first job outside college in those days, this was 1995. So, the internet was kind of just about there at that time, right? And my first job was in Delhi, in Noida, actually, with a startup, a rather large, like 150 member kind of startup, which was headquartered in the USA, and obviously with a production center back here. And in those days, they used to write code for handheld devices. So imagine 1995 and handheld devices. They were like more like arm-held devices. So it was like not in your palm, but it was somewhere here. So you need like a muscle to support that device. So you had this Motorola's Magic Cap, that was one, and then Apple had this thing called Newton. These are like massive objects. And this company had the proprietary mail software. So we wrote the mail software. It was called Mail on the Run, which was a pretty cool thing in those days. But it was the time when you start your device, you had the toot sound of your modem going on, right? I mean, it was that time. And there were a nice like bunch of young guys. We used to all kind of stay in groups of 2s or 3s in this very nice apartments in Noida in the it was the army sector. So it's a good life. I mean, people from all the decent colleges out of India, getting together, hanging out, good fun. Work was not stressful. No one worked till after 6 o'clock. So I did that for a bit, but my compared to most of my peers, I think my parents were actually way more conservative. So even when it came to IIT, they were keen I stay somewhere close by Bengal. So they were still in Ranchi at that time, which in that time was in Bihar, now in Jharkhand. But for them, even the thought of going to IIT Kanpur, IIT Madras was like going to a foreign country. So I was kind of coaxed into putting in the option that will get me into IIT Kharagpur. So when the counseling time came, so I was in Kharagpur. So when I was graduating, I mean, pretty much most of my classmates from a class of 32, went to the US. I think about 25, 26 people must have gone to the US. There were very few who actually took a job and stayed back. But going to the US was a completely foreign thing for my parents, and they were absolutely scared. Like, no way you're going to go to the US. So Delhi was already a stressful thing. Noida was a stressful thing. So anyway, so for them, okay, fine, go and work in Delhi.
Delhi over the US as a safer option, huh?
Yeah. Delhi over. I mean, it was more of US was this really, really foreign. I mean, old times UK was vilayat. I mean, I don't know what's the term for.
I lived in Bombay for 8 years, and when I go to Delhi, I feel like it's a foreign place for me.
But that's true in India. I mean, Delhi, Bombay, and it's like a hate relationship, right? I mean, people in Bombay don't like Delhi, Delhi don't like. I mean, they just can't. It's dramatic, and I think the diversity in India is obviously much more than most of Europe, if you could look at the country there, right? But anyway, so 1 year in Delhi, and their parents were already saying, what, why don't you come back to Calcutta? I mean, forget about US and all. But I guess we thought differently in those days. I mean, when I think back now, I was like, how was I even considering going back to Calcutta, over going to the US, which most of my friends. So whoever actually had not gone to the US the first time around, the following year they were back in the US, either with some scholarships or they're on some job. But I actually went back. So I went to Calcutta, and my dad said that, listen, I mean, just try something. I'm sure I'll get something here. And the Calcutta, the grand old company used to be, even now it is PricewaterhouseCoopers. That time Pricewaterhouse, not PricewaterhouseCoopers. So from audit on one side to IT services on the other, there was this massive giant, the Bengali company, the Bengali consulting company. So I went with my resume and walked into Pricewaterhouse office, and then then I met some people, and then they asked, why do you want to come here? I said that my parents want me to come here. So they said, oh, fine. So when do you want to join? I said, oh, do I have a job here? You have a job. So it's very simple, right? In those, literally they saw the resume, IIT computer science, and then they said, listen, you may not necessarily have enough challenge here because this is more of business consulting, with obviously IT support happening there, but we are not talking of computer science or anything. I said, no, that's all right. I just want to come back to Calcutta. So anyway, so I went back and I resigned, and I just came back to Calcutta. So I stayed with my parents, and I had a really good time. And it was a pretty long journey every day. Chartered bus to office from one end of town to the other, and on the way back. Sorry.
The next generation is going to hear stories about us commuting to the office and be like, why didn't you just do a video conference call?
Yeah, exactly. Also, yeah. I mean, in Bombay, if you were taking those trains, which I think most people in Bombay did, right? That's not easy. So, yeah. So I would take the bus one way. On the way back, I mean, you actually stop in two different places. We would, have half a dinner on the way home, and then it was good times. And for some reason, there was no real sense that you got to do something big in life. I mean, I think most of us kind of happy with what we were doing. And then at that time, I mean, again, there was, it was obviously not that challenging for sure. So, and then an opportunity came up within Pricewaterhouse in Philadelphia. They had a big center there, and they said that we are doing, some state-of-the-art work there. So whatever technology-related support we give to our clients, those days, SAP was big. Some of these Oracle Financial, some of these packages were big. So we did a lot of R&D work back in Philadelphia for PricewaterhouseCoopers. They said, why don't we transfer it to Philadelphia? And you kind of try and challenge yourself a bit, do a little bit more of cutting edge stuff than what you're doing here. So for some reason, my parents found that all right, because it's like a transfer from Pricewaterhouse to Pricewaterhouse, so it's kind of okay. So that worked out, and they were kind of okay with it. So I went. For me, it was again, mentally I was not maybe prepared, but then I had so many friends out there, so it was okay. So fresh off the board, that was I worked there. I did 2 years at Philadelphia. I absolutely loved it. I mean, Philly is a less celebrated city, I think, compared to everything on the east or the west. But being fresh off the board for me, America was Philadelphia, right? So it was great. I mean, it was very diverse, very cultural. Work was great. Again, not stressful, but very enjoyable, and made some very good friends. We used to play cricket in the evening by, where the steps on, Franklin Boulevard, where they, where the Rocky movie was shot. I mean, there's this famous thing where Stallone like jumping, doing his boxing on the steps. So literally there was a field next to it. We used to play cricket there. It was fun times, absolutely fun times. But I just got this inkling that maybe this was a time to work a bit harder and try and do a little bit more than just living off what I had learned so far. So anyways, the way out, I was told, was go get an MBA done, because that kind of opens doors for a lot, and then you can choose what you want to do. But you at least get the whole menu item when you go for an MBA. So I went to Rigmarole, did my GMAT and all of that, and I got into a few colleges. NYU was obviously one of the better ranking colleges. I joined there, and with absolutely no idea of how this thing is going to be, because in our minds, and that was partly me not talking to enough people before going there. In our minds, growing up in India, college is somewhere you go and study, right? So the fundamental thing of college is study, but this was different. I mean, literally on the pre-orientation, we were told that, listen, you go to, what do you want to do after this? So I was like, that's what I've come here to find out, what I want to do after this. No, it doesn't work that way. You got to know what you want to do, because otherwise it'll be a waste of time. So I said, how does it work? You got to be a consultant, investment banker, private equity, buy side. And I was in complete panic. I was like, I have absolutely no idea. I mean, for me, the closest was consultant, because I was in PwC before. But what is the point in doing the same thing that you were doing all over again, right? So, so I thought that let me try something different. I mean, since I'm challenging myself anyway, let me try the other extreme. So let me try and be an investment banker. I had actually no clue, honestly, what to do as an investment banker, and it was kind of embarrassing, because everyone seemed to know. I mean, I seemed to be the only guy there who didn't know what this was about. They walked the talk.
Don't feel bad. I was around the same vintage as you, and I did undergraduate business, so I broke my parents' heart earlier by not doing medicine or engineering. And the first time I heard iBanking, I thought the I meant internet. So I'm like, do you mean like online trading accounts? Online. I often ask our younger employees at Trust Vista, what are your long-term goals? And the reality is nobody knows what they're doing in 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know, you don't know what's going to be there in 10, 20 years. But if you don't have a hypothesis, or you don't pretend you know what you want to do, what are you doing today?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you need to be able to reverse engineer your career path. And most young professionals, the first few years, they just kind of stumble. Right? You go to the college because parents say go to the college, or you study this matter or that matter because somebody tells you to study it. You get some campus placement, you get some other offer. But at some point, you have to realize, hey, life is a long time, and I got to start thinking about what I want to do 20 years from now and make choices today related to that choice.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And then, so, I mean, when I think of hypothesis, so obviously you narrow down your shortlist. You can't have too many things. And then you kind of mostly come down to two. You come down to two options, maybe maximum three. And then at that point, and often, hindsight is 20/20, but whatever at that point in time, what makes more sense to you, I would go with that. But then the most important thing I would give myself a timeline. That is very important. So you have your hypothesis and you have your time, and you can't just have a hypothesis open-ended, like I try it till I can try it. So I used to always have very hard timeline. So for me, when I start, so for me, the thing was, it seemed like the most challenging thing for me to do would be, something on the investment banking side. So I said, let me take this up. But I would give myself like 4 years or so. I would try for 4 years, and then if it really doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And then I kind of took the bull by the horns. And yeah, I remember. I mean, I'm sure you also went through. This similar effort. I mean, on the corridor of NYU, there were these telephone banks. There's a series of telephone banks, and at any point, you are kind of using your telephone card, and you're just picking this steel receiver thing, and you're just calling all these people and saying that I'm so and so, I'm at Stern, I got your contact from so and so place. I'm very keen to do what they used to call an informational interview with you. Like a very cheesy thing to say. It's like I want a job, but I want to do all this dog and pony show before I get a job from you. So informational interview, and it was a nightmare. I mean the first few times I literally would go take the phone and go, like, the words wouldn't, I wouldn't know what to say, or like, how do I even do this? But once I got into that, I mean, once I got into doing it, it was I impressed myself. It's like, I mean, just the fact that I was able to talk and just say some nonsense stuff, and which seemed to make sense to me. I mean, it was just amazing. I was like, wow, like, this is like, I can't believe I'm doing this myself. I'm like all techie, telling all these things. Then you get a few interviews, and then there are all these issues that if you had a particular background, it was always easier to get a job in that background. So if you are an investment banker, it's easy to be an investment banker. If you're not, it's more challenging. So we all went through our things. We did our stories, and so for me, this whole thing of not being far from where my parents are, that really has been the overarching thing in my life for most of it. So I was very clear that I didn't want to work in the US. I wanted to work somewhere closer to India, but I was not yet ready to go back to India. I wanted somewhere else. So the obvious choices at that time was Hong Kong and Singapore, really. So all my kind of job searches were focused on Hong Kong. Something which is more of an MNC with global operations who would come to campus, but there would be a chance to go back and work in Asia. So
from a timing perspective, that's probably a great choice, because you graduated in 2001, right when the tech bubble had burst in the US.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the middle of the 2000 summer. I had a Deutsche Bank internship in Hong Kong. It was the best thing ever. A really good experience, and I was using my tech background to obviously work in the MTT, the Media Text and Telecom team, and a bit of private equity, because the tech thing, obviously I got a bit of a premium around being a tech guy, and Hong Kong was fabulous, and they had this very strange thing that Hong Kong was a hardship position, so you made more money in Hong Kong than you made in New York. That was the best part of it. You are paying taxes, so as such you are getting less in New York. Plus they would give you like this fat housing allowance. It was amazing for a first-year associate to live so low. Obviously, worked 18 hours, but that's beside the point. But it was, the rest of it was great. I just absolutely loved Hong Kong, and then I got a full-time offer from them, and I had an offer from that time Solomon Smith Barney, so Citi now. So Solomon Smith Barney had an offer from them in Hong Kong, and I had an offer from Deutsche Bank. But Deutsche, so obviously Solomon Smith Barney was better known as an investment bank, as a very powerful name in those days. But I had just gotten comfortable with the Deutsche Bank guys. I mean, there were a bunch of people I liked, and I just, eventually. So when I came back, then the dot-com bubble had burst, and it was disaster. I mean, it was absolute disaster. 2001, no one was getting jobs. They were rescinding job offers and everything that had been given. The 2001 was terribly. I mean, so many of my, so literally first year out of, so you graduated in which year?
I was 02. My co-founding partner was 01, and we both joined Merrill Lynch Tech Investment Banking.
So you've kind of seen that, all of that, right? So 2001, I remember making 90%.
My first 6 months on the
job.
job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think 90% of my class, whoever joined in Wall Street, they had their offers rescinded. So that's obviously a long time back. But I was happily there in Hong Kong, and then again so Hong Kong and all of that was with a bit of a lag, but all of that was coming. So they were, they eventually shut down the whole, almost the whole tech team in Deutsche Bank. Had a really big tech team in those days. So I had, I was in the US for a bit. There was a rotation program. I spent a few months there, initially training. On 9/11, literally 1 week before I was training in the financial center Marriott, was staying there for a month for the training, and then I was in London for a while when 9/11 happened. We obviously, even the building, the hotel we were at just some time back also kind of came down as an aftershock. We kind of, I mean, you were also around the same, you would have also been quite close at that time, right, witness-wise. That was there. And then Hong Kong, so Hong Kong was a huge layoffs happening in Hong Kong, and but I had, so one of my persons who I had done my summer with, he was based out of Singapore, and he said that why don't we just move to Singapore. So it was almost like there was a layoff chasing me, and then I was trying to dodge it. So I dodged it in Hong Kong, went to Singapore, dodged it for a while, and then it was also getting close in Singapore because they were just decimating the tech team. And then my boss at that time was moving to India to become the head of Deutsche Bank Investment Banking in India. And he asked, me and one of the other guys to kind of come with me. But it was complicated on the personal front because, I met my to-be wife in my last semester in school. So I was on an exchange program to France in the HEC, the business school HEC, and my wife was she was a full-time student there. So I was a part, like an exchange student. She had just finished her. She's from India, but she's a fluent French speaker. So she had finished her school and she was doing her internship and job right after. So I met her there on campus, and then obviously we were in a relationship, but it was a bit complicated because I had to go to Hong Kong to work. She had a good job back in France, so she stayed back in France. I was in Hong Kong. Then eventually, it was just not working out because of time differences. Phone bills were like, I must have spent my entire housing allowance on phone bills. And then, so she was kind of at one point obliged to move to Hong Kong. And then she compromised and took a job in Hong Kong, very different from what she wanted to do. And while she had just settled down, I was kicked over to Singapore. So then she stayed back in Hong Kong. I went to Singapore, and then and she loved Hong Kong. Then finally, I was moving her to Singapore when this whole India thing happened, and I said it's kind of not fair on her to drag her to India after all these moves. So I said that, what, I'm not going to move to India, stay back in Singapore. So I was unemployed effectively. So there was my position was not there anymore because the guys were all moving to India. So I was unemployed for a bit, married and unemployed. Both students loan. I had loans from NYU. My wife had loans from HEC. We had high bills, and we have quite extravagant lifestyle for young graduates with no money in their pockets. But I guess all of us, I'm sure you had similar feelings. Because in those days you thought the future held so much for you. We were not scared of anything, right? There was no money, but there was no worry that, okay, you know what, we're going to go bust. It never came to our mind that we could go bust. But
perception of risk is very different.
Perception of risk is very, very different, right? Because you see this whole, it's like you have a financial model. You have like all the years of cash flow and the terminal value in the end. You're at the beginning of it. You're like this cash flow and then this term. There's so much to it. Right? So there's nothing to worry about. Negative cash flows now, but that's how it always is. So we were a bit innovative. We tried to do some interesting stuff. So and yeah, not a lot of people know about this. It's a bit cheesy, but I got some modeling assignments there in Singapore. And it was pretty good pay. It was like
you don't mean financial modeling?
Sorry,
not financial modeling.
No, not financial modeling. No, this was old school modeling. Huh? So obviously that was I was much better looking. Had a lot of hair in those days on my head. And no, it was great. It was actually still modeling. So they took pictures, and Singapore was promoting itself as a big medical tourism hub. And so I was Dr. Raj. And I had to take. There were all these still pictures, and it was like $100 an hour, which was really a lot of money. So I would actually, so it was like, like you have like the farmer goes out or the hunter goes out, works all day and, brings money back home. I was like, I used to go get cash back home. So, today was 5 hours, so $500, which is not bad. So I actually was doing this thing and getting cash back home. So my wife also did a bit of an entrepreneurial, stint. She started, she was a marketing, she was, in haute couture and marketing back in France. So she tried to do like an Indian fancy garment kind of business out of our home. So I was helping her in that. I was helping her make PowerPoint presentations about Indian clothes and how they're made and all of that. And then we were doing these little gigs and fashion shows to get her business up and running. I was doing a bit of this, more not long term, just short term. But then we were both, we both love cooking and we're big foodies, both of us. So we opened a small, we did a few catering things also. So we would cater to parties out of home. My wife and I would cook, and we would supply like food to parties. We made some money off that. So we made some money off modeling. So we kept ourselves busy. It was quite nice actually. It was not a lot of money, but we were stretching our boundaries. I know, while everyone else I knew had like nice stable jobs. We did a bit of that, but then at that time, it was a tough time. 2001 SARS in Singapore was a disaster of a time. There were no jobs at all. But junior people employment is a bit easier, right? So I connected with Standard Chartered Bank was unknown on the investment banking scene in those days, and so they were setting up what they call a corporate finance division, and they had hired some very well-known rainmakers from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch at that time, or it was just Bank of America at that time. They had hired and they were staffing up, and I got interviewed there, and I got a job there, but way lower salary than the plush Deutsche Bank job, right? Deutsche Bank and its housing allowance and everything. This was like my to-be boss. I mean, he had a huge laugh when I asked for a housing allowance. You're right, like housing allowance. And then it was a much lower salary, and I was in two minds. I was being advised by others saying, no, wait it out. I mean, why do you want to kind of dilute your brand? Wait it out. But this is again, this whole hypothesis thing. I mean, it is one of the best decisions I ever took, joining Standard Chartered Bank in those days. It was just a whole different ball game, a totally different experience from any of my other investment banking friends. The way it worked for us. It was obviously a small powerhouse with no big credentials to boast of, but some very very clever, smart people, very well connected, very good execution skills, and a good mix of debt and advisory. And that debt advisory combo was phenomenal. We had no equities, so it was only advisory, and I mean, the team was very experienced in structuring debt. And on the back of that, we got M&A transactions, because otherwise, if you're a brand new name, you just go, and it's difficult to get M&A deals, right? We have so many big, powerful houses with huge credentials, where a newbie like us would not have made a dent. But this whole leverage finance bit was that did everything for us in those days. So we had a combined division called corporate advisory, which was like M&A and leverage finance. And we, as I said, we the most kick-ass deals ever. It's just unimaginable the stuff you would do. I mean, I remember one of the landmark deals that we had done was, for a lesser-known Indian Singaporean group, and we were doing a transaction in the U.S. I mean, we had like nothing in the U.S. We had a small syndications team in the U.S. Nothing else. But we were doing a deal which, in the end, was like $120 million transaction, which was literally almost nothing in equity, is almost all in debt. So 120 million transaction, of which it was structured like a 60 million term loan for the financing. There was a 30 million Mauritius mezzanine that came in, and there was a 30 million vendor loan. So 120 million where like nothing really had to come from the equity side, and we got that. We structured that. We executed a very complex transaction in the US, and obviously, it was the loan was initially difficult to syndicate, but it took us a year or so. But then we kind of syndicated the loan out, and then we made a ton of money for a small transaction of that size. And that was in those early days, a very Standard Chartered Bank thing of doing structured deals. Obviously, the people, they would not do something foolish. I mean, they had that comfort that it's something that we could eventually get paid back, and that was a combination of principals who we knew and who we trusted, who we know would not let us down, and who would we would maybe have to delay some of the payments, but eventually we'll get paid out. And then pretty rich fees, and we would make a lot of money. And these are not necessarily deals that would get publicized in a big way, but commercially, I think the bank did really, really well. So, and great training ground. I mean, it was not like a big 3-4 tier structured investment banking thing. We learned on the job. We were, as junior people, given a huge lot of leeway to take decisions. I mean, I would be sent off on China on a transaction, and I would be sitting there alone, and going through management presentations, interacting with potential buyers, and we would do. So we'd obviously call in our seniors, when there was no option, but we were given a lot of leeway, and they knew that we could obviously make our mistakes, we could fail, but we got. So the learning was immense. I mean, the formative years, around I joined in 2003, so the 3, 4, 5, these were phenomenal years. I mean, obviously working like crazy, and then very soon the lower salary was made up by very decent bonuses, and the bank did well, we did well. When I joined the team, it was 15 people, and it became eventually 150 people across, starting from two cities. It was across, I think we were in 7 or 8 cities after that, across all of Asia, a bit of the US, Australia. We were spread all over, and they became a big powerhouse. And it was not just debt and all. It was like on pure advisory. We would take on any of the Goldman Sachs, Citi, Credit Suisse on transactions. We are like the credentials built up really well. India, particularly, I think for quite some time was our biggest franchise. Some very, very landmark marquee deals were all done. And then I did my stint there. I did from 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7. I was in Singapore, and I was doing deals in India, in China, Southeast Asia, pretty much the entire gamut. I was operating out from Singapore, growing up the ranks, getting a lot of exposure. And then there was a lot of news around Middle Eastern companies investing in Asia. There was this one landmark deal which is known to people here in Asia. This large group called Al Futtaim Group out of the UAE. They made a landmark transaction called the Robinsons Group in Singapore and Malaysia. There was some $450 million transaction. So the bank advised on it, financed on it, ran the general offer for the transaction. So it was a very well-known trade. And now this is again, sometimes hypothesis going wrong. So when this trade happened, and based on that one data point, I think people decided that that's the way the world's going to go. So you have Middle East buying into Asia. There's a lot of deals to be done. I was, by seeing, you've kind of worked in South, you work in India. We need someone, who has this Asian flavor to go and work in the Dubai office, so that we can have an in-house person who's connected to our world here, and try and broker, cross-border transactions between Middle East and Southeast Asia and India. And this was again, one of those hypotheses which I kind of thought, yeah, fine, I'll give it my 2 years. I'll give it by 2 years, and then I'll go. But it's the perils of forming theories based on one data point, right? So then I moved in 2007, and 2008 the financial crisis happened, right? And all of Middle East was selling everything. No one was buying everything. So my Middle Eastern career was mostly selling companies. I came on a hypothesis which never really worked out. It worked. Eventually, it stabilized, but I think the initial bit was entirely running sell sites. And difficult. Middle East it's a whole different ball of a cup of tea in terms of how transactions happen. I mean, Singapore is as good as Hong Kong or New York. I mean, there are like precedents, rules, theories, a lot of case studies. This is the Wild West. And Middle East is like, it's not Middle East, it's like completely Wild West. I mean, every deal is its own case study. The capital markets, even till date, I mean, this is like much earlier. It's still, it's looking for the right word. I mean, in a bit archaic, in a bit like incrementally it changes, but it's still, nowhere close in terms of, any of the, developed legislation. So, I mean, what London was 40 years back. I mean, still, I think we are still getting there in terms of, having simple things like if you reach the 30% threshold mandatory tender offer, which is like there in the world forever, everywhere. I mean, even something like that is non-standard here. So these are like slowly, kind of coming in. But I came on the 2-year hypothesis, and now it's been 14 years. So then your time gets warped once you move to the Middle East, and things are just take time. It takes time, and then the learning becomes very different. So I think where I found a place for myself was, I mean, a little bit more on the personal interaction side. I mean, a lot of the deal doing here is through personal interaction. I mean, in many cases, someone will not sell it to someone because he's getting the best bid on the table, but because he likes the guy. I mean, that's straightforward as that. I mean, it is very, very, very counterintuitive sometimes how deals happen. And then also things like, we have been in situations where we have been in situations where we will, kind of be in the middle of a deal where we are working with a client, and we are seeing that the business is in bad shape, and there's a bid on the table, and then while diligence is happening, the business gets worse and worse and worse, and at the end of the diligence, the bid is reduced, and the client says that, what is this? The bid is reduced. I said, no, but that's normal, due diligence, right? And the business is going down. So, no, that's not good. Why would you? I mean, it's a gentleman's word. They said they'll pay this. I said, no, but things have changed. It took 3 to 6 months to do due diligence. So he said, no, they are not trustworthy people. I said, no, but you're selling the business. I mean, no, we will not do it. So then you kind of paint out the scenario for them that there is no alternative. So if you don't sell, and if you go to someone else, the price will be even lower. So whatever you are getting right now is the best possible price you can get. And if the money doesn't come into the business, your business will go down further. But generally, if you have someone who is upset, you can never get a deal done here. And that is shocking. So yeah, we had a situation in this specific case. I'm saying this was a maritime company. It led to death in the end. And then at that time, when you're looking at that reduced bid, it looked like a really rich bid on the table. And we keep saying the guy, listen, why? He said, no, I didn't like it. So it is like that. So the human interaction element, I wouldn't put a stereotype. There are obviously very, very professional setup, private equity, but a lot of the family-owned businesses, especially, a lot of the family-owned businesses still, go with this stereotype. It has changed for sure over the years, but so there, I think it needs a different. While this will frustrate you, but this can also create a unique capability for you. Because if you are the guy who can talk their language, understand what their triggers are, you are better off making a deal happen than the classic corporate finance banker who comes and talks numbers. So I think I found a place a little bit for myself on that front. So I think I connected well with people. I understand the ethos of how things work here, and that's been my I think my kind of my big learning, which from Stanchart, and then moving on, obviously there's a second, third episode of all the various other things that I'm doing afterwards. But I think that whole principle of making a deal happen and looking at the software aspects of the deal, that's I think is a little bit which I've understood, and I think kind of bring to the table in transaction.
We both started in tech banking around the same time, and when I started Trust from a hypothesis perspective, I didn't plan for it, but Dubai became our largest market in the early years because the financial crisis happened, whereas the Western world was, retrenching in financial markets. Dubai was still growing. People like you were moving there, and the challenge was there were no junior people to hire. You hire people from London and come for a year or two and have their cool life experience and go back. So we started working with some of the largest financial services firms in that region back in 2007, when it was a wild west and it was still technically a small market. Everybody kind of knew each other, right? And I imagine that's how we started working with each other as well. Over the years, hear from someone that work with this person, and that's how deals happen in that region, as you say. Relationship and trust, referrals carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then this is a non-standard market. In the early 2006, that's when you had all the the big swinging financial bankers, financial sponsors, bankers from US. They were all moving to the Middle East because there was this whole sovereign wealth fund game. I mean, the Qataris were buying everything expensive, that you could get in the UK. And there was this whole, again, this hypothesis, like the hypothesis that I moved based on that. Well, they're going to, the sovereign wealth funds are going to buy, all of Europe and all of UK and all of US. And they had like all these super well-paid bankers being moved from Wall Street, London, back to Dubai. Again, that did not work at all. I mean, the sovereign wealth funds eventually still did sporadic transactions, but there was no need eventually to have sovereign wealth fund bankers, sitting here in Dubai, treating this as one line of revenue, because that was not really required. But the market is different. I mean, obviously the government and the sovereigns on one side, they form this big space that drives a lot of transactions.
Talking about the sovereign wealth funds, and obviously the Wild West at the time, I know a lot of private equity firms were setting up shop then as well. A lot of them were setting up shop just as a window dressing for the LP's benefits, not that they knew anything about doing investments, they'd get their partners from New York or London to go sit in Dubai. But to your point, they didn't have the relationships to get deals done. And so some of these biggest global PE brands were sitting there not doing any deals, but they were explicit. You know, if you had conversations, yeah, we're not going to do any deals, but the LPs over here want us to have an office here if they want to be an investor in our funds. Right? So that relationship aspect drove a lot of business decisions that wouldn't seem logical otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, KKR, Blackstone, all these guys had forever offices here with more for fundraising really. They ended up doing a deal or two here and there, but they obviously had their offices. But the spectrum is, again, you know, it's not like any of the other financial centers, in the sense that you have these massive government you know, sovereign deals which are happening, you know, from your Abu Dhabi to your you know, Saudi Aramco and you know, PIF and you know, the Qatari funds. I mean, they're obviously, you know, really big transactions that happen. And then you know, where the you know, kind of the mid-size space, which in most you know, financial geographies, typically, you know, you'll have your early stage companies. Once the, you know, the cash flows become a bit mature, you have the, you know, the private equity guys investing, and they obviously, you know, take this business to a certain level, and then you have the strategics buying them out, and then the strategics in turn are eventually bought out or invested into by, you know, larger government sovereigns and larger funds. So here, when I moved, I mean, the one part which was very underdeveloped was the very early stage bit. So this whole you know, VC angel investing, or that ecosystem, when I moved here in 2007 and all, was very minuscule there. What was quite vibrant at that time was the private equity landscape. I mean, there were a couple of obviously, you know, the Abraj was one of the bigger names at that time. And then you had, you know, Gulf Capital, Al Waha Capital, a couple of, you know, very solid firms, and they were great. I mean, because, you know, they drove the volumes in the middle market, the few $100 million kind of transactions where like most of these operated at. Those were driven by them. So so the government and the sovereign infrastructure was always there. Strategic was there in some shape or form. The private equity was kind of there. And the startup ecosystem was not there. VC was not there. That's how, when I came in, that's how it was. Now, what happened over the span of you know, the past 10 years was this: the VC and the startup thing dramatically changed. I mean, it is really vibrant now, you know, compared to how it used to be a decade back. And to a great extent, or beyond you know, just the private investments, a lot of it is driven by, you know, corporate venture capital, which is part of firms. It is also led by you know, government accelerator programs. So like, there's a setup here in Dubai and Abu Dhabi whereby they invite new technologies to come and, you know, set up on these accelerator programs, and then they're effectively, the government says that, you know, you go through our program, and if your solution is something that helps one of our government departments, we'll be an off-taker for you. We'll sign up a contract for you. And that's the best thing for startups, right? Because they're looking for money, they're looking for top line. So these governments brought in the top line. They gave them the ecosystem to go and network, you know, with the investors and here, and they also gave them an off-take, which, you know, brought credibility to the company. So between that and, you know, angel investors and the regular VCs taking shape, when that landscape like dramatically improved. But the issue was that, you know, the typical after VC you have the PE bit, right? And you want a good strong PE setup to be able to, you know, help the VCs. But the PE thing has currently is very dislocated. So you know,
how much is that because of the Abraj?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, most of it is because, you know, just like Abraj was responsible for building the PE landscape here. You know, it literally, I mean, we in Standard Chartered Bank worked very closely with Abraj, you know, back in the day. And I mean, they had the, I mean, if you leave aside the complication and corruption that we read of in the news, I mean, they had the most phenomenal deal doers, amazing guys. I mean, from the junior most associate, you know, to the MD, there you sit across the table. I mean, these are brilliant guys. They're just so good. The ethos and the ability to get deals done and structure, I mean, that was a different league, and that kind of spread across the setup here, which is why, you know, we had a nice 10-year period of, you know, very vibrant private equity activity, which, you know, everyone benefit from. So, but when the VC thing kind of came up to speed, the PE thing is now kind of gone. So that makes it a little bit challenging. So VC exits become a bit of an issue. I mean, the capital markets here are still not in a position to give exits to VCs. Yeah, absolutely, but there's been almost no instances of smaller companies getting onto the capital markets. So it's really been to some extent strategic stretching themselves to get into startups earlier than they would in the past. That's to some extent. And otherwise, obviously, you've started to have foreign investments coming in, and then from the classic angel to angel pre-seed, seed, ABC. This is like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So all that. So to fill up the space, you have like lots of it's almost like continuous funding happening constantly. So which is not ideally how it should be, but that's how it is, unfortunately. But that I think, but the positive thing is that the early stage stuff has really taken shape now over the years, and the middle market where many of us operated, that's a little bit on the softer side now. The larger sides, which have some government elements, those are obviously doing quite well. And obviously, in the context of my own work, I've tried to straddle some of these things to because when the life changes from a farmer's life to a hunter's life, I mean, you have to keep hunting, right? I mean, you have to be hunting. You have to send out teams to different parts to make sure someone comes back with something. So I got, and this is like we're not talking a large organization here, so I have my fingers in various pies. From Fleming is this partnership that I worked with. It's a really good setup. It's the private advisory boutique of the Fleming family out of the UK. So in back in the 90s, Jardine Fleming was this very powerful joint venture, which was very successful in Asia, particularly Asia, Southeast Asia. They did some really big family deals. Then JP Morgan Chase bought it out in 2001, and the family kind of went back, to managing their family office. And then it was a decade later that one of the founders, Rodney J. Fleming, I mean, he came back and he set up this boutique advisory firm with the not to have it like a full-fledged investment banking firm, but to run something which provides senior discrete value-added advice to clients across the spectrum of products. We're not constrained by products, but we have in our panel like a whole bunch of very senior people who are in their second and third incarnations as corporate bankers, investment bankers, debt advisory, debt rating. So they kind of bring all of that to the table, and then depending on resource requirements, we work with other parties to kind of put a whole deal together. So that's obviously takes up a part of my energy where it goes. But beyond that, I do a lot of smaller things myself. Some of these relate to funding early stage projects. Some of it is also to manage some small principal investment that I personally make. There are a couple of, I have one small investment in a waste recycling firm. I have this tomato pure harvest investment that we talked about. I have even earlier stage, even smaller investment in an inland salmon farm, which is in the feasibility stage. So it's obviously at a much earlier stage. I put in some money there. And then my latest thing, which I'm very passionate about, and it's let's see where it goes. Is I like this whole agri and tech and sustainability side. So and I was working on this, exotic Georgia, Tbilisi, on a project earlier in the boring cement sector, which I'm quite close to. I've done a couple of big transactions in the cement sector. So we're trying to do something greenfield in Georgia for a while, which was on hold, but in the process, I went to Georgia many times, and I love the place, love the ecosystem there, and it's a company which is 15 years post coming out of CIS, which is now it's in a westward facing country, which is really wanting to do a lot of new things. So among roads, infrastructure, power, and all of that, it's also a very fertile agri setup. So it's one of the along with Ukraine and Moldova, it'll be most probably one of the most fertile lands in the world. The weather is, you're from California, the weather is like California. It is dry, and it is kind of chilly in the winters, and it's warm in the summers, and and what do they like to grow? Almonds. I mean, that's like what California is the king of almonds, right? So I'm actually right now working in trying to get a bunch of investors into almond farm in Georgia. So very different from all the other things that I'm doing. That's obviously under my own Trident Consulting setup, but it's very interesting. It's meaningful. And while land prices, labor prices are extreme in California, water shortage is extreme in California. This is a country which has exactly the same, climate offering, and land prices are like 1/5 of California. Labor prices 1/3 of California, and water is like free effectively and plentifully available. So it made a lot of economic sense, when I studied this. So I'm working with a few people to try and put that forward. So that's a bit of my passion project nowadays. I mean, there's not a huge upside that can come out of it, but it's kind of meaningful, and I love the place, and go get to see a real farm.
You spent 15 years at Standard Chartered, became the head of M&A for the region before
14
pivoting
years
3 years ago to doing boutique consulting and lower middle market, early stage advisory. How would you describe your hypothesis now for the next 20 years that's shaping the choices you've made more recently and are making actively?
So now I've moved on from one hypothesis to multiple hypotheses, which is a bit of a violation of my own theory. But this is a little bit of this new age stuff, which we already see our kids when they think of a job. I mean, we all grew up with this mentality: job is something that you do for like a big outfit, right? But now with like for the likes of Trust, I mean, I literally one of my most successful years on my own was 2019. And I ran most of 2019 just with Trust Vista. I mean, I actually, pretty much did all the, negotiations and, brokering stuff on my own. And obviously I was a bit more hands-on than I used to be in Stanchart in terms of doing a bit of my own models and presentation. But everything else, Trust Vista did for me. So the fact that it is possible to do that, I mean, it's scary to think of it, that I spend the entire year with just myself, and that has been mostly financially the most successful year I've had. So it's possible. So the thing is, but there's again, I wouldn't say I'm great. There's a huge element of luck in it also, right? All these things come with a huge element of luck. So obviously things have to align for it to work. There has to be a fortuitous element to all of this. But so the hypothesis right now is that there's and it's happened by me learning things. So when I left the bank, my first, at that time, the hypothesis was that I want to work in early stage companies. I do not want to work, I do not want to work in a large corporation anymore. I want to use my skills of mature market deal doing in trying to help some of these early stage companies, because if an early stage company is successful only if you work backwards from the later stage. So because you want to end up there, you want to end up where these large companies end up. So in that, and it's the same story. I mean, the same history keeps repeating itself again. So the journey is pretty much well documented. So working backwards, I was like kind of okay, this is how you want to end up being like this large mature cash flow company, and these are the steps working backwards. So I tried to bring a bit of that, and I did a couple of decent fundraisings. I mean, one of the marquee ones was in India actually. It's called Hero Electric, is the electric two-wheeler business, the largest electric two-wheeler business. Now obviously you've got Ola and all coming in, but for a long period, Hero Electric was the largest, and still is actually the largest electric two-wheelers business. And I worked with the family and helped them structure and raise one of the earlier rounds of around $25 million. So which was in my incarnation as trying to help early stage companies raise money. But what I realized, and within my 2-year hypothesis, is that it's very difficult to make money in this space because this work is great. You do meaningful things, you make a difference, you do all, but because it's smaller size stuff, it's difficult to make money. So then I realized that I still like it, but I don't love it enough to just keep my leg only in that boat. So I didn't want to stop that, but I realized that I need to go back to my old school stuff. I still have young kids to put through college and income to be made. So I do need to get the regular stuff. So I kind of went back to my looking at deals which were more of my old school, cement and steel, large transactions where you can make a decent amount of money. And then the difference here compared to how it was in StanChart was that I would put in lower success fees, but I would put in a retainer or a stage fee so that the money keeps coming. Because in the bank we could afford to work for 2 years and not get paid, but obviously you can't do that anymore. So so right now it's a combination of these two really. It's a combination of doing some of these larger trades which have ongoing income, and along with that some of these earlier stage things like the Georgia project, which is more of a passion project. It doesn't get me a huge income, but it's something kind of meaningful, gets me a stake in there. And then the third is obviously the principal investing bit, where I've learned my lessons by putting too much money into one business, and kind of moved on to the portfolio bit. So now effectively these three things. So I mostly shouldn't call them a hypothesis anymore, because I don't think there's anything more I can do. So I'm doing all the three things it is possible to do. I'm doing all the three things in parallel, trying to allocate my resources, working smartly with partners. Depending on it, I work closely with a friend who's an Africa expert. So if anything happens in Africa, I work with him. So I've different over the years built up some very strong relationships, with people. Either with geographic expertise or with product expertise. So depending on what's on the table, I would work with them. So yeah, so I mean, right now, I guess I'm matured enough to come with whatever the current formula is, and I allocate resources depending on how it's going. So if it looks like there is a lot more to be done on the early stage investment side, I'll put much more there. But it'll all be obviously a function of cash income that come in. So I'll be investing more if I'm getting more cash income coming from the other side of the business. So yeah, it's and I think in that sense, compared to most of my earlier friends and colleagues, I think I've tried much more, and and been a bit non-standard, as I said, compared to at any stage. So if I started at IIT, most of my IIT friends did something else. If I went to Pricewaterhouse, eventually most of my Pricewaterhouse guys did something else. If I went to investment banking, most of my investment banking guys did something else. If I went to Standard Chartered Bank, eventually most of Standard Chartered Bank did. So I think wherever I go, I kind of get in with something, but then eventually I end up doing things a little bit differently, which I like. And then I have my I love traveling, and I one other side of me is I'm a big foodie. I write on food. It's not done much off late, but I should write for one of the famous food critics here in Dubai. So for new restaurant openings, I would go as an anonymous food taster, eat at a restaurant, write about it without my name. Because those days I was still working in StanChart, so it would be a bit cheesy to say, Arnab Chatterjee, head of M&A, went to taste food. So I did on a different.
At heart, you are still a Bengali, so you need to have something.
All of that. So writing the book bit has not happened, but I write a fair bit. I mean, on different contexts, so smaller bits, nothing big. So the food writing, in a way, checks those multiple boxes of both food and writing. But honestly, you have to be more creative than that. Food writing is not that creative. It's more of factual reporting with a bit of your own personal color. No, inshallah, one day it will be mostly a proper book will be written, but I think I'm still quite some distance from it.
I think I learned a new term recently that I think would be appropriate to label you as a multi-hyphenate, right? A person who has several professionals or skills, because you say I am a writer, banker, advisor, investor, right? So that's the stage of your career you're at now. You are a multi-hyphenate.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, the key thing, obviously, very important thing, and for all of us, I mean, you got to manage your mind well, right? Because else the mind plays games on you. I mean, because you are, especially if you're not doing the cookie cutter work. I mean, if you're in the cookie cutter work, I mean, the only harm that the mind gets is boredom. There's nothing else, but the rest is not there. But if you're not doing cookie cutter stuff, there are too many different things which happen to your head. So you really do work on it. So you have to, have your own discipline in terms of how you do things. That is physical and mental discipline. So I'm quite disciplined in that sense that, I'm pretty regular with my workouts, regular with my prayers. I do my yoga. So I have a nice framework outside, because since I'm not doing the regular job, not putting in those regular hours, I at least have the liberty of, doing things my own way. I think when you have that liberty, it is very important to, put a routine around it. So, and for me, the routine is everything that is non-work is actually my routine.
Well, that's a wonderful philosophy. Arnab, it's been very much a pleasure speaking with you today and hearing your story and having you share some words of wisdom for our audience. And we look forward to continuing our partnership with you and playing out the multiple hypotheses you have now together.
Likewise, Abhilash, and TrustVista has been a great partner for me. And as I said, financially, the most successful year in my life was supported with TrustVista. So I'm very, very much indebted to you guys for that.
Well, it's mutual. Thank you, Arnab. Look forward
Thank you. Take care. All the best.